Ah. Oh. Won't touch anything. God damn it. Okay. I oh God. I have the primordial ooze on my fingers, and I didn't. Okay, no. I'm so sorry. I was only gone for a few minutes. I had to pee, and then okay. Long story short, one, I had to go to the bathroom. Two, I had Jasmine work on my tattoo last night, right? Okay, and Jasmine works on this tattoo for like 6 hours, gets a bulk of the color done, right? And wraps it up real nice, cleans it, wraps it up real nice, and is like, hey, just keep this on until and when you go to sleep, you can go ahead and take it off, clean it, put some Aquaphor on it, and go to bed. You don't have to wrap it up again, but like, just keep an eye on it. I was like, okay. I go to feed Pond in the middle of the night. Once again, 4 a.m., her feeding time. So I go and I feed Pond. She's in the kitchen eating, and now normally I'll let her eat for like 20 minutes. Now, past that, if she finishes her food, she'll then scream. She's so spoiled. She'll scream for me to come back, pick her up from the counter, and take her back to my Genshin game, where I pet her in my lap until she digests her food, and then I go back to playing Genshin. Now, the thing is that she eats on like a little countertop, so the dog can't get to it, so she'll jump up onto this little countertop. And I go to, now, keep in mind, fresh tattoo has just been like worked on less than 2 hours ago, right? I go to get the cat, and now when I take the cat to the food, because sometimes you also have to carry her to the food, she wants you to take her there. I'm very proactive about putting her on my opposite shoulder, right? Tattoo's been worked on for 6 hours and is totally fresh. Like, it's still got the wrap on there. And I go to pick up this cat. And instead, Pond decides to take a leap of faith and just stretch both her paws out wide. And one goes on each shoulder, and she just sink claws. And when I tell you, I barely avoided screaming bloody murder and dropping my cat in the kitchen at about 4 in the fucking morning. I just like, and I just sort of like cocooned her like a baby, and like just sort of sank to the floor to my knees, and I was like, oh my God, she just ducked. So I was like, I gotta stay on this to make sure it doesn't get infected. Because it was wrapped up, but it's thin. It's like a thin, clear, like cling wrap sort of esque shit. It's like a little sticker thing. You stick that on there. It's just essentially cling wrap, right? It sticks right through it. So like, I did have a scratch on there, and it's kind of faded, but it was right in the middle of like the black of the eyeball, so you can't really see it, and it didn't bleed. It didn't seem like it. You can see it if you're looking like at the skin, but you can't really see it on camera. But she just sort of wrapped her whole paw around this shoulder and just like, and I've been trying to stay on top of it and like clean it like a little bit more than I would ordinarily. So I was like, intermission, I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna clean it, I'm gonna put some more Aquaphor on it, and now I got Aquaphor all over the phone, and I got Aquaphor all over my hand, and I got Aquaphor all up in my business. On the tattoo though, so that's where it's supposed to be. Anyway, that's why I had to take a little break. I just wanted to go to the bathroom, put some Aquaphor on, disinfect my arm. Nobody tell Jasmine. I don't want Jasmine to worry, because Jasmine is so proud of all her work, and as she should be. And, if you don't know who Jasmine is, good, because you don't need to. But if you do, and you do know, She's real sweet. And I don't want her to worry too much. Yeah, I tried to wipe a bulk of it off, but I was like... But I figured I'd tell you guys since there's only like 11 of you in here. Did she or is she? Because to my knowledge, she hasn't, but she might. Yeah, Jasmine was Layla, definitely. She is going to be Layla, and she's probably going to be Zarenia too. So, we're having a whole fun time. Yeah, she's just so sweet. She works so hard. And I love the purple. You can't really see it too much. The shading's not done, but a lot of the main block color work has been done. We're going to add more detail later. But that purple looks awesome. Okay. Anyway. But it's not done yet, but she got a lot of the color work done. And so, like, it was totally fresh. And she did the middle of the eyeball after she got all the mushrooms done. And so all of that was solid color black. And she just sank her claw right in the middle of it. And I was like, oh, that hurts so badly. Oh, Nightshade's here. Thank you for the compliment. I think it looks good too. Anyway. Will do. Most deaf. She'd love to hear that. But I just like her style. It's very, like, macabre in the sense that when you look at it, it's just sort of disquieting. Her style is, like, very... And the way she did the teeth, I particularly liked. And I knew I had to get her to do this particular one. And so, if you know, you know. Anyway, but she's done fabulous work so far. I'm thrilled with it. And I'm trying to take good care of it. But I didn't think Pawn was going to just leap of faith off the fucking counter at me. I don't know why I didn't expect it. She does that every once in a while when she gets super hype. And she just... I was not prepared. I had nothing on. I had this exact tank top on. And then just the wrap over top of it. So there was no barrier for her to sink her claw into other than my straight up fresh tattoo. Fresh new wound. And she's just gonna like right in there. And I was like, maybe I should have put on a sweater before this adventure. Didn't think I had to. I thought... Yes, it hurts so bad. Anyway, I took a bit of the intermission to go wash off my tattoo and like clean it really good and put more Aquaphor on it. And then the live ended and I was like, I came back and I was like, damn, I thought I did that so fast. I was so proud of I was like, I bet I can get this done in 5. And I did not. Granted, it's really like, you really have to get it dry because otherwise water just leaks straight into your armpit. And I'm not sitting here with water in my armpit for another hour or so. So yeah, most deaf. It hurt like hell. We're good though. We're solid. We're back. I still plan on... Yeah, no. We can't be doing that. And then the thing is the worst part is the symmetry of it, right? Because if one armpit's wet, you then have to make the other armpit wet. And I don't want wet pits at all anyway. So, but the disparities gotta go. It's gotta be, the synchronicity of it has to pan out. So then you're gonna make the other armpit wet. So I had to dry it. No. Yeah, we're not doing water pits today. So I had to sit there and get like a washcloth and like get real... I was like, I gotta make sure this entire thing's dry before I'm not gonna be able to live. It's not okay. I can't live my life that way. Some people can. Not for me. Not for me. Look, if you want to walk around with water in your pits, that's your business, and I'm not judging. The last one kept leaking into my elbow. Like I said, some people, if that's your business, that's what you're into, great for you, not for me. Not particularly into it, but takes different strokes, you know what I mean? And you do you and live your best life. And I'm going to go into the world with dry pits. All right, I made you wait long enough. We've been through TikTok currency, my tattoo business, my new fresh injury, and finally our stance on wet and dry pits of all shapes and sizes. And now we can return to the book if you all want. Who's ready to go? Oh, guinea pig. Oh, little babies. But that would hurt like hell still, though. Oh my god. Guinea pigs are adorable, but I can only imagine their little scratchy claws. No. 2. All right. There was an awkward pause, eventually broken by Miss Smith. "You're just standing there," she said to Cabal. "Are you waiting for something?" Cabal seemed surprised by her comment and then confused. He looked around as if expecting to find an explanation for that confusion written in the air. Finding that an unrewarding avenue of inquiry, he turned back to his companions. "That was a peculiar sensation. I had a distinct idea that our concerns would be put into abeyance, for a while at least. Yet no, they are as pressing as they were a moment ago. How very strange." "You want strange? I can do you strange," said Xerenia, already happy to regard their presence in a mosaic of existential graveyards. "I have known fragments as perfectly normal." She pointed at the ground a little way ahead of them. "I think they've got mice." A grave lay open, hastily and brutally excavated, and the coffin disinterred with vigor rather than care. Bones lay scattered, scraps of meat still adhering to some of them. With easy lack of repugnance or propriety those who deal regularly with the dead exhibit, Miss Smith took up one of the bones and examined it closely. "Teeth marks," she said immediately. "Ghouls." "Oh." Cabal was thoroughly blasé at the prospect. "I thought we might be in trouble for a minute. Both Miss Smith and I have had extensive dealings with the ghouls. I doubt we'll have much trouble for them." "I cannot agree," said Miss Smith. "The ghouls of this place are not like the ones of the necropolis, nor any others I have ever met. Look, Cabal. See how clumsily the grave is opened? How thoughtlessly the traces are scattered." It was true. Ghouls are fastidious eaters for purposes of self-preservation, if nothing else. They eat what they need and no more. And they always tidy up after themselves. They see no profit in drawing attention to themselves, for that way lies outraged humans, and all ghouls really want is a quiet life and moderately gamey meat. This foresightedness has, through generations, become more instinctive than habitual. They would as soon leave blatant clues of their presence as they would boil their heads, leave off breathing, or take up Morris dancing. "Make up your mind," Cabal nodded at the gory bone. "Those are either ghoul teeth marks, or they are not." "They are, but their behavior is distinctly ghoulish," replied Miss Smith, deploying a technical term unique to the profession of necromancy. "I have always had an easy relationship with them, as you know, but ever since I was brought here, I thought they'd been transported along with me. I heard them snickering and glibbering and was relieved at first. At least I would have allies, but they would not speak, not only to me, but even to one another. I was forced to take refuge in the pagoda." "From the ghouls?" Cabal was aghast, for the ghouls to menace her was equivalent to being threatened by... The smile foundered in his mind. Nothing should be less threatening to Miss Smith than ghouls. "I never saw them clearly, but their outlines were wrong. Their voices wrong, everything they did, so very wrong. And If she had seemed distressed by her recitation of the shortcomings of these ghouls, it was as nothing to the awful things she found she must now report. "There's another." Her voice sank. "Another witch. I've seen her with them. The nights here are short, but so are the days. And on the first night I was here, I thought I heard something in the distance, so I crept out from the pagoda and went to see Johannes. They were having an orgy. Not an actual graveyard orgy." She looked thoroughly perturbed at the memory. "It was horrible." Zarenya made a dismissive noise. "I've been to oodles of orgies. You're just a prude." Maybe I should have put a warning on this. Whatever. We're past it now. Miss Smith glared at Zarenya. "I am not." Zarenya lowered her forebody so she could look Miss Smith in the eye, rested her chin in one palm, and smiled a little triumphantly. "Really? Do tell." "I should point out that the orgies Madame Zarenya attends subsequently fill the obituary columns for weeks afterwards," offered Cabal. Zarenya favored him with a dirty look, but didn't deny it. Miss Smith shook her head. "No, you don't understand. The orgy, it was trite. That's why it was horrible. Honestly, I'm a witch who lives in a graveyard. You think I haven't seen orgies before? This one looked like it had been planned by a vicar based on overhearing the sexual fantasies of the choir. It was asinine." "I confess I'm having trouble imagining an asinine orgy," said Cabal. "Oh, I'm not." Zarenya crossed her arms and grimaced, a devil of the world. "I've seen some bloody awful ones, really. The most fun for the attendees was when I had them. Also, their last fun, but that's the price for my favor." "A steep price." "I've had no complaints." Miss Smith interrupted. "It looked staged, is what I'm trying to say. It was like a novelist portrayal of a witch's orgy, sporting with monsters, that sort of thing." "Never done anything like that yourself, then?" asked Zarenya with professional interest. "With ghouls? Oh, no. I mean, look, they're sweet beasts, but they're a bit... ew. If I feel the need for a little companionship, I leave the necropolis and visit the taverns." "I feel we are getting off the subject," said Cabal, thoroughly out of his depth and far from matters he found comfortable. "Still, we have at least established a distinct oddity in this place. The tombs and graves are real enough, and it even had the option of a real graveyard witch. Yet instead, we find a form of play acting in progress. This warrants investigation." "Why?" said Zarenya. "Because the nature of the place seems to be formed based on those who visit it. Mortal remains, witches, orgies. These are our concerns, are they not? All are materialized here, and one hopes there is a purpose in that, because finding that purpose may be our only way out." Look, the only reason I didn't really determine it a problem, I want to go ahead and specify, is because the orgy isn't real. It's not. You'll see. It's not real. It's literally like... it's like Miss Smith says. It's staged. It's like what a conservative Christian virgin would think an orgy was. Like horror novel style. But it's not real. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you'll see. You'll see. The trees became weird and eccentric in their growth, the grass a brighter yet more toxic green as they progressed. None of them commented on the matter, but it was apparent to them all that the place of graves was becoming distinctly more melodramatic as they grew closer to the home of the new witch and her cohort of fantastical ghouls, as opposed to the more workaday ghouls with which Cabal was all too familiar. "What are we intending to do when we find this interloper anyway?" asked Zarenya, traipsing lightly across the lurid sod upon her many pointed feet. I have to say I'm a little underwhelmed at the idea of bringing my particular brand of good times to a bunch of corpse-eating doggy boys. I feel the opportunities for murder are still many and alluring, madam. Cabal was cleaning his blue glass spectacles as he walked, and then attending to the hang of his cravat. When the enemy, an enemy they were, he felt sure, were finally encountered, it would be to his advantage to be able to see them properly, and to theirs to be done away with by a man with tidy neckwear, if only from a sense of terminal satisfaction. I am not devouring the soul of a ghoul. Heavens only knows where they've been, grubby beggars. I don't mind the soul of a double-dyed villain. Those are spicy, but I have my limits. Cabal, whose own view of ghouls had not been dissimilar until he had endured a brief period of ghouldom himself, decided not to mention any special interest in her views one way or the other. It would only lead to the sort of face-pulling already exhibited by Miss Smith on the same subject, he knew. We're almost there, said Miss Smith, her tone determined, but also betraying apprehension. You do have a plan, don't you, Cabal? The immediate plan is entirely one of reconnaissance. You can hardly expect me to evolve some elaborate scheme when the very nature of what we shall face is currently unknown to me. A witch with ghouls, I did say. But what sort of witch? There are many. And I begin to wonder what sort of ghouls. There should only be one type, but from your description, they would seem different from the usual crowd. I own myself perplexed. I do not enjoy perplexity. Will it be a reconnaissance in force? Said Zarenya, employing the index and middle fingers of each hand to scratch quotation marks into the air. Your somatic punctuation dismays me, Madame Zarenya. If you wish to emphasize speech, may I suggest speaking emphatically? I could do that, yes, but I'm terribly tactile. Anyway, I wish to suggest some irony in the term. By reconnaissance in force, you actually mean, let's have a look, and if there aren't too many, wait in and kill them, I gather? Oh, darling, I love it when you spot subtext. The Spider-Woman is, purring, said Miss Smith in an undertone to Cabal. Spiders do purr. Didn't you know that? Belatedly, Miss Smith realized just how acute the devil's senses were. Why, they're just cute as little putty cats. Miss Smith quickly and wisely changed the subject. Just beyond the rise, that's the witch's home. With some difficulty, Cabal managed to talk Zarenya into adopting a stealthier form. Grumbling, she crushed her aft body down into something more human, although this time she dispensed with a French couture and adopted a green twill suit and walking shoes. You look like a Bavarian lesbian, said Miss Smith, purely as an observation. Zarenya was delighted. Exactly the effect I was trying for, Liebling. She produced an alpine hat with a small orange feather in its band and clapped it on her head. Don't I look fiercely practical? She winked at Miss Smith, who coughed and looked away to hide an unexpected blush. Is there anyone you don't flirt with? Cabal asked as they crept to the top of the rise. You, in case you didn't notice, she whispered back. We're friends, I hope. If you wish to dally in my web bower, you need only ask. I shan't be dragging you off there using my usual wiles of saucy suggestiveness. Also magic, some chemicals too. But it's all mainly down to how bloody good I am at what I do. You neglected to mention mesmerism, said Cabal a little tautly. Ah, yes, the fluence. I hope you're not still upset about it. It was for the best. True. Logic could often mollify Cabal. It was for the best. They reached the ridge line and paused there. Cabal took a small pair of binoculars from his bag. I shall go alone. One head on the near horizon may avoid detection where three will not. Taking it as read that one head would be his, and ignoring the crabby expressions Miss Smith and Xerenia were no doubt lavishing upon him as he crawled the last few feet, Cabal crested the hill and looked down upon their new enemies. The binoculars were hardly necessary. He was looking down a distance of perhaps 5 feet to where a pack of 20 or so ghouls were creeping up to meet them. The ghoul in the lead saw Cabal appear and grinned at him, its ears standing to attention like those of an inquisitive Doberman. "Hello," said the ghoul. "Hello," said Cabal, with a great deal less enthusiasm. The ghoul pack swarmed over them, but with no obvious intent to hurt them. Instead, they were bundled up in a multitude of rubbery arms and borne down the hill in the direction of the new witch's lair. Cabal gave Xerenia a hard look as she allowed herself to be captured, but she just gave him a wonderfully happy smile in return, and a wink so broad that they probably caught it on the plateau of Leng that lies in desolation at the edge of everything. One or other of the creatures that frequent that damn place must surely have paused in its performance of horrors and thought, "Did somebody just wink at me?" Down into the Vale of the Witch they were carried. The colors now the essence of lurid, the great fire before a tomb, blazing in jagged tongues, the shadows dancing without nuance or graduation. Cabal looked about himself, his misgivings growing by the second. He had seen artificial realities before, but they had always seemed real within themselves. This was a parody of the real. A clumsy woodcut colored by a child. He felt they were being carried into a volume of the Brothers Grimm. Past the bonfire with its blaze of hot, papery flames, they were carried in the very dictionary definition of triumph, until they arrived before the witch's manse, an extraordinary tomb wrought in obsidian and white marble, crested in red and detailed in green. Statuary of satyrs and nymphs, cherubs and imps were caught in mid-frolic, mid-cavort, and the unlikeliest combinations of imagery for a place of the dead. It was not of the real world, but wrought from the fantasies of an addled artist turning his hand to anything that might pay the rent in his exorbitant absinthe bill. It would then be entitled something along the lines of "The Lair of the Witch Queen," and subsequently used as the cover of a magazine for an audience whose imaginations ran hot. Before the lair of the Witch Queen stood the Queen of Witches herself, less a formal title and more an excuse for fancy dress. And such a fancy dress. She was gorgeously arrayed in a great cloak of black velvet, trimmed in silver, and topped by the sort of excessive high collar that makes the matter of peripheral vision rather moot. Beneath the cloak she wore a dress of crimson silks with a décolletage that owed as much to the arts of structural engineering as couture. She herself was very familiar. "You!" cried Johannes Cabal. He was taken aback to realize he had said it in unison with Xerenia and Miss Smith. They looked at one another with reasonable surprise. Cabal recovered first. "You know Ninika?" he demanded of his comrades. "Ninika?" said Xerenia. "You're wrong. I know Udrolvexa. Has she been calling herself Ninika too? Oh, that would explain a lot." "No," said Miss Smith. "That's Tana James, that hoity bitch. I'd know her anywhere. I gave her that scar myself." Cabal and Xerenia looked as hard as they could, but there was no sign of a scar. Xerenia raised her eyebrows. "Well, this is a rum-do. We can't all be right, surely. That would be pushing coincidence with some force for my least favorite colleague from the pits of hell, and you will appreciate that I know some real stinkers to moonlight as the bête noirs of you two as well." Cabal's attention had never left the Witch Queen. "No, we cannot all be correct, but we can all be wrong." The three of them were paraded before her and then secured by the wrists to a trio of great stakes around a fire. The stakes had definitely not been there when Cabal first spied the encampment, but now gave the impression that they had been there for days at least, to judge from the emerald turf grown up around their bases. "Ooh, bondage!" Xarenya's smirk was quite unforgivable under the circumstances, and unappreciated by either Miss Smith or Cabal. "Well, well, well," said the Queen of Witches, on settling herself upon her throne of bones, which also definitely had not been there a moment previous. "Please," interrupted Cabal. "You beg for your life very easily," said the Queen, her smirk no more forgivable than Xarenya's. "The only begging I was about to make was that you might save us the burden of listening to your villainous monologue, no doubt larded with icy, ringing laughter at dramatically correct intervals." The Queen looked for a moment as if her temper was going to depart in a huff of "How dare you!" and threats, but she reined it in, and the triumphant smile returned. "Do you even know who I am?" "I believe so. I believe that you are the natural sum of this place. You are the spirit of Nemesis." "Tanith James is not my nemesis," whispered Miss Smith. "You either do her a disservice or think too much of yourself. The Lady Ninika is undoubtedly mine. At least at a material level. There are certain entities to which I have caused some displeasure and whose powers are undoubtedly greater than Orphelia Ninika's, but I am not their main focus. She, however, has almost literally moved heaven, earth, and hell to revenge herself upon me. If I meet my death at a near date, there is a good chance it will be at her hands, or those of her assigned agents. Search your heart, Miss Smith. You say you scarred this Jones woman. You think she does not hold undying enmity to you?" Miss Smith started to speak, thought better of what she was about to say, and said, "But I'm dead." "But you were also a necromantrix. This Miss James you mentioned, what was her discipline?" Miss Smith considered this, and her face fell, as if being tied to a stake before a bonfire by a clan of comic book ghouls was insufficient grounds for upset. "My body was destroyed, though." "I destroyed it myself," Cabal said, as if it were a gallant courtesy he had performed upon her mortal remains. In necromantic circles, it actually was. "But your spirit is extant, and you dwell within the dreamlands, where you may be destroyed again, and finally by anyone with a little knowledge and a great deal of animosity. Would that describe Tanith James?" Miss Smith did not reply. Evidently, the description fitted Tanith James to a T. Cabal returned his attention to the Witch Queen. "As I was saying, you are the spirit of Nemesis. All three of us have powerful enemies, and you have embodied all of them in however it is that we perceive you. Well, now you have us. What do you intend to do now?" "Do?" The Witch Queen laughed, and did so in an icy, ringing peal of malevolent amusement. "Why, destroy you, naturally." A stage whisper floated to Cabal from the direction of Xarenya. "This is all part of your terribly clever plan, isn't it, Johannes?" "Alas, no," he admitted. "I was not expecting this person to be a material metaphor. It's very disappointing. So, unless my plan was for us all to die in the most embarrassingly asinine way imaginable, and it was not, then no, this is not all part of my terribly clever plan." "Asinine?" said the Queen. "What do you mean, asinine?" "To be brief, madam, for your theatricality wears upon me, you are a conceptual embodiment of undying personal animus. You currently represent, in your uncertain way, the three current banes of the lives of two of us, and the afterlife of the third." "I know all that, Cabal, for your didactism wears upon me." "Touché, I'm sure. I promise to be brief, and so I shall. You are a damp squib, madam, a foreshortening of expectations, a pathetic failure. You are Nemesis incarnate, yet you do not hate us. Instead, you take the targets of real hatred from real people." "And a real devil." "Thank you, Madame Zerenia, and a real devil, and dispose of them mechanically. For all your posturing, you feel no passion. For all your stagecraft, you experience no malefic desire. You take the raison d'etre from real people for no real purpose. You are a failure. Yes, said Zerenia, taking up the theme and warming to it. You're nothing more than a big premature ejaculation. Mind you, where I'm concerned, it's always a bit premature in a sense if you take my... Madam. Sorry, said the devil. Ever so. She made a gesture as if locking her lips with a key. I do not care for your sophistries, necromancer, said the queen of witches. You shall die here and now for... She paused and looked to Zerenia with puzzlement. How did you make that gesture? Your hands are tied. Zerenia lowered both hands, and the hempen bounds swayed in their wake. Were tied, dear heart, if you've been paying any attention. You'd have gathered I'm not human. Rope bonds are a little insulting, so past tense. My hands were tied, in much the same way your arms were attached to your shoulders. The Witch Queen looked like she was about to state the obvious, but then that was the moment that Zerenia decided that 2 legs were bad, 8 legs were excellent, and any statements about the current locations of other limbs was lost in the sudden excitement. Is this your terribly clever plan, darling? Zerenia picked up a charging ghoul as she addressed Cabal. Bring me along and just depend on me to kill everyone when things get fraught. In essence, I like it. She upended the ghoul and examined its nether regions. She curled her lip. These aren't proper ghouls at all. No genitalia. These are ghouls for maiden ants. Pfft, boring old option. Be it is, then. And so saying, she broke the ghoul upon a raised and chitinous knee, throwing the dying monster aside to turn her attention to its irate colleagues. Miss Smith caught Cabal's eye. Well, this is weird. Cabal nodded. Coming from a witch whose soul inhabits a cemetery in the Dreamlands, that says a great deal, but I cannot argue with you. They watched Zerenia go by, bucking like a wild horse, a ghoul impaled on one leg and another held by the scruff of the neck, being used as a flail to dislodge a third that had leapt up on her back. There are certain elements of the odd about our current situation, Madam Zerenia. Perhaps if you freed us, we might be able to help. Busy, she called back, and she called it happily. Unrestricted violence was a cool water on a warm day to her. Gotcha! And a pair of faux ghoul bodies, entangled and broken, went arcing over the stakes and into the bonfire. No hurry, Cabal dangled listlessly from his bonds. I'm sure we'll find some other way of amusing ourselves. That's that passive-aggressive thing, isn't it? Zerenia regarded him with a jaundiced eye. I've read about that in my magazines. And while Cabal was wrestling with the concept of magazine subscription services that deliver to hell and concluding that probably narrowed it down to the Reader's Digest, a giant spiderish leg scythed over their heads, slicing off the tops of the stakes and through their bonds in a single action. Necromancer and Graveyard Witch tumbled to earth in a shower of wood chippings and undignified language. Cabal climbed to his knees and rubbed circulation back into his wrists while shouting at his rescuer. You almost had our hands off, madam. So ungrateful. They'd have grown back. And so, blissfully unaware that the limitations of cellular regeneration in humans, Zerenia carried on tearing the ghouls that were not ghouls into lovely, rubbery pieces. While the pieces were not especially lovely, it would be borne in mind that at least half the function of these few words is to give the potential narrator of an audio version of this book a doubtful moment. By the time Cabal had recovered his bag, and more specifically, the Webley pistol of generous caliber that lay within it, there was little point in offering aid. Ghouls lay around in abandonment, some whole, most not, and all quite perfectly dead. Amidst the carnage, Zerenia stood, scraping one of the vanquished from her leg. That was fun. Brief, but energetic. She cast the corpse aside and performed a little spidery dance of victory. I didn't get to kill that Witch Queen character, though. Did you? Cabal and Miss Smith shook their heads. Neither of them had noticed the Queen's escape either. We were hardly afforded the opportunity. Oh. Zerenia looked around. Bother. I'd say that constitutes a loose end, wouldn't you? She may also be the key to our escaping this place. We must find her, and ideally not kill her. Cabal gave Zerenia a significant look. At least not until we've extracted any useful information from her. It seemed unlikely the spirit of Nemesis could have got very far, and philosophically unlikely that it would seek to go very far from them in any case. They therefore decided to search the crypts that lay within a small radius of the central structure, and since that radius permitted easily calling to one another, they would split up to do so, the quicker to be done. Agreeing that the immediate act of whosoever found the Nemesis Witch first would be to cry halloo to the others, they split the circle of their search into 3 sectors and went to work immediately. Cabal decided to start, rationally enough, at the closest crypt, a prim box of pale sandstone. As he approached it, however, his eye was caught by one lying further away, indeed, right at the edge of the search area. He could not say what drew his attention so certainly to this cottage of the dead. It was an unkempt sort of thing, asymmetric, with what seemed to be half a flying buttress to the left, the base long crumbled away. The design was of the new Gothic, a style for the pretentious suburbanite. The stone itself was soot-stained, surely snatched from some bourgeoisie district and dumped here in splendid isolation on the slope between 2 low hillocks. He did not recognize it at all, yet it seemed very familiar at the same time, perhaps even comforting. He walked to it, almost in a dream, and his steps fell faster as he approached. This was the place, he was sure. This was where he would have hidden, where he'd have sought refuge in the curious graveyard. He was sure. But why he was sure, he could not say. The door opened easily under his hand, a well-wrought thing of oak bound in iron strips, and swung noiselessly open. With only the slightest of hesitations, he entered. The crypt's interior was illuminated by gas mantles, which was a nice change from the usual pitch darkness, or at least guttering torches of his experience. Still, what sort of tomb has a gas meter? What sort of corpse can be depended upon to put a shilling in that meter when the lights grow dim? Low alcoves to the right and directly ahead contained coffins, and unusually he felt relief that they were whole, and he could see no mortal remains. Not that he would take much glee in such a sight. It should be understood, but that corpses in every state, from perfectly fresh all the way to moldering bone, and all the intermediate stages of rot and liquescence, was so well known to him as to have rendered him blasé. No, this was not a matter of squeamishness, or at least not a merely sensual horror. To the left, a ladder leaned against the wall, and by it a grandfather clock, its glass nearly opaque with grime. Yet he could hear the steady tick of the mechanism's escapement within the case. It was, all things considered, a very homely sort of tomb. He could only conclude that the Nemesis Witch had made this place hers, and had her ersatz ghouls gather domestic comforts for her, up to and including an interdimensional gas pipe. He bit his lip at this point. Either the ghouls were a great deal more ingenious than he had given them credit for, ridiculous cartoon caricatures that they were, or he was not truly understanding what had happened here. What was happening here, what this place meant. He did know, however, that the Nemesis Witch was here, and she was waiting for him at the foot of the steps that opened by the grandfather clock, the steps that led down into the cold, cruel clay. He did not hesitate to set his foot upon the top step, even though the strong and tried sense of self-preservation that had kept him alive through 100 circumstances that would reasonably expected to kill him was warning him, screaming at him, that this was a trap that he would not leave unscathed. Cabal felt the forebodings burst into a dazzling flare of baleful premonition as he took the second step down. Then he took the third, then the fourth, and the fifth, and so descended into the realm of Nemesis. The Nemesis Witch, the Queen of Witches, the Red Queen, Lady Misericord, Lady Ninika, so many names for one woman, and there she was, waiting for him. The underground crypt was dry and small, and there was only one corpse there. One end of the chamber was scattered with old household bric-a-brac and faggots of firewood. The other end, accessed through an open arch and up a couple of steps, was clean and empty, but for a grave-sized hole dug into the dusty, dry clay. By the grave half sat, half lay Lady Ninika. She wore something different from her brief appearance as the Nemesis Queen, now gowned in a simple dress of the color of funereal wrappings, gray, white, and a dull cream. It was folded decorously around her legs so that not even an ankle was exposed. She herself looked more purely like Ninika than earlier, and this Cabal took to be a sure indication that she truly was nothing more than a figment. She was pale and dreadful. She did not smile the smile of an arch-villain when he stood before her. She did not even look at him. She held a bunch of flowers taken from some memorial tribute and dropped withered petals into the grave, one after another. "Are you truly the spirit of Nemesis?" asked Cabal. "I would almost be disappointed if this all turned out to be some scheme of Ninika's, and you are her beneath cadaverous makeup." The spirit ignored him. Petals fluttered down. "Then let us assume that you are not Ninika," he spoke, to break the silence as much as anything. It weighed upon him. It confined him. "Let us say that you are something else, either sent to warn me or destroy me, although a warning would be preferable." At this, her gaze rose to meet his,